Hello to everyone on this lovely Tuesday, April 20th. Welcome to our second episode of Gabbing about gardening. We're coming to you from Cortes Radio, 89.5 FM, CKTZ. Hey, I'm your host, Lucretia Shanfarber. You know, on Cortes Island and our neighboring islands, we are steeped in the garden culture. Just about everyone has a garden on these islands. We grow lots of our own food here, all kinds of veggies, berries, nuts, fruits, herbs, and of course we grow flowers, because we love those bees, and they are the ones who are pollinating all that yummy food. We also save seeds, and we share our bounty with each other. That's just the way it is when you live on a beautiful island, but that can happen anywhere. We have islands of gardeners all around the world. Gabbing about gardening is all about sharing. Today on Gabbing About Gardening, we're going to gab with 4 gardeners from 3 islands who will share their unique stories and gardening experiences with us. We're going to begin with Adam Schick, a professional market gardener, an organic farmer, and a gardening teacher from Linnea Farm on Cortes Island. Adam is going to gab about phenology. What's phenology? I'm glad you asked. I'll give you a little hint. It's not about reading the bumps on your head. That's called phrenology. Phenology is about reading the seasonal signs from Mother Nature. And Adam is going to help us to use that knowledge to be better gardeners. Then we'll check in with Marc Doll on Quadra Island. Marc loves to gab about soil, and so do I. We have many wonderful gabbing sessions. I've asked Marc to help us face up to some of the ways we might actually be abusing our soil without even realizing it. And Marc will give us a few practical tips for building soil fertility. We'll also be gabbing with Michael Ableman on Salt Spring Island. Michael is the author and photographer of 4 acclaimed books distributed worldwide, including Street Farm, Growing Food, Jobs, and Hope on the Urban Frontier, which tells the story of soul food farms as they transformed vacant urban land into street farms. Michael is also the subject of the award-winning PBS film Beyond Organic, narrated by Meryl Streep. And then we'll wrap up our show today, gabbing with gardener Jennifer Banks Doll, also from Quadra Island. Jen is mom to, I think they're 11-year-old twins, Gabriella and Charlotte. Jen will share some of the ways her whole family gardens and farms together on their 40-acre homestead. That's all happening today on Gabbing About Gardening. I'm Lou. Thanks for joining us, and thank you to our sponsors. Speedy Bin, one of my favorite compost bins. Also, thank you to Cortes Island Garden Club, Quadra Island Garden Club, and Campbell River Garden Club for their support. So, our first guest is coming right up, Adam Schick. I've admired Adam for a long, long time. He is a dedicated garden teacher. I've learned so much from him. And his market garden produce, well, it's the stuff of dreams. Beautiful, delicious, fresh, organic. Adam Schick joins us now from Linnea Farm on Cortes Island. Hi, Adam, and welcome to Gabbing.
Hello, Lou. Thanks for having me.
I am so grateful that you came in out of your amazing garden. So much must be happening there right now.
Yeah, this is a very busy time of year. It's nice to have this stretch of hot weather, but greenhouse is full. Soil's starting to be cultivated. Things starting to go in the ground. Yeah, lots of promise.
Well,
great to have spring here.
yes, and great to have you with us. You know, a few years ago at a talk you were giving at the Quadra Island Garden Club, you included a discussion on phenology, and that was a whole new word for me in my vocabulary. I throw it out there whenever I can. But tell us, what is phenology?
Well, it's basically the science of appearances. It's basically paying attention to the seasonal and cyclical natural phenomenon that's happening around you and relating that to climate, plant, and animal life and how those things are all progressing. And for us as gardeners, we're always asking, and every single seed catalog has a guide to planting, but paying attention to what's going on around you with the natural world gives you sort of using them like highly specific weather instruments to tell you when the soil's right and when the conditions are right in your garden to plant those things.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up that whole seed catalog thing, because I found that going strictly by that really just doesn't cut it. You know, because things are always changing, right? The climate is changing, the temperature. So what are some of the signs we should be watching for now, these days, in this season? What are we supposed to be attuning ourselves to?
Well, again, what's really important when it comes to sort of using phenology in your garden is finding plants that are sort of in the same similar sort of climate situation. So in my own garden, I have a little patch of daffodils. I pay attention to the salmonberries. I have a beautiful pear tree in the back of the garden. I have a lilac tree that I pay attention to. So when these things flower, it tells me that certain things can be planted. So, you know, we all love to pay attention to the flowers in our garden. So something like the daffodils. So when the daffodils are flowering in and around my garden, I know that pretty much when they first start to flower, I can plant things like radishes and mustard because the soil is going to be warm enough. And when they're in full flower, I know that I can get things like peas in the ground. Again, this is one of the most important things about phenology is record keeping or paying attention to these things year after year. I mean, really, that's just one of the most important skills as a gardener is just observation, paying attention to what's happening around you and trying to link what you're doing to the season, to your garden, to success, because there's no point in starting things early if you lose that momentum. So the phenology and paying attention to, you know, that lilac in the corner or the bulbs in your garden and making note of when they flower every year, and then it'll give you a guide that's set on nature's calendar as opposed to anything that we impose.
I love that, nature's calendar. And that really is what phenology is all about, isn't it? And I have to admit, I'm absolutely terrible about record keeping. I always have these wonderful intentions that just somehow get buried, excuse the pun, as I get further into the season. Do you have any tips on how you keep your best records?
Well, I have a little setup in my greenhouse, which, I mean, my greenhouse is also my office. So in the greenhouse, I got a little bench, and there I have all my clipboards, and I have last year. So this year I have, 2020's records of what I did while I'm working on 2021. And then I have my little phenology chart in there where I'm paying attention to where things were last year and sort of helping guide where I'm going this year. There's a real comfort once you start building up a few years of good record keeping because intuition is very important in the garden. And when you have good records, then you can sort of verify your intuition with past years and your successes. And not only is it important to sort of remember our successes, but the things that didn't work out are also really important in the record keeping so that we can avoid those mistakes. And I have to say last year with the way the pandemic and everything went down, my notes are a little bit more esoteric and full of like, oh my God, what's going on? And a little bit confused. So it's nice to have records from the past before all that stuff too. So the deeper your history goes, the sort of more refined your observations become.
Well, I definitely have journal envy, and I do feel re-encouraged. Thank you. I'll pick up that journal again. Now, you've mentioned planting too early. That's really something so many of us, we're as soon as we have wonderful weather, we get out there and we start planting early, and then things either get super cold or super hot. You can't really depend on it. Is there a way that we can use phenology to really determine clearly what we want to plant next? You've talked about the daffodils and the salmonberries and the lilac. What's coming up next that we might be watching for?
Well, the thing that I'm really watching right now is the lilac, because lilacs grow all across Canada, and as much as I have my experience here on the West Coast, I grew up in the prairies, and there's lilacs that bloom there, and again, in Winnipeg, when those lilacs are out, you're probably going to be frost-free and everything's going to be great. And here, when those lilac flowers start to show themselves, I better have a bed ready for my beans and corn. So that's one that you can really be a hit or miss. We have such a short season in some ways when it comes to heat units here on the coast, when you can get your stuff in well-timed, when there's still moisture in the ground, but the soil's warm, you're going to have lots of luck. So a lilac is a great indicator for warm weather crop. And, if you're putting things like beans in the ground before it's below 20 degrees Celsius, that soil, things are going to rot, and you're going to have those problems throughout the season. Getting things synced in season and having yourself synced in that season is going to just make success happen for you. And the other thing is to when we're trying to grow food on the coast, it's a year-round thing. This is not a sprint, and I think there's that spring fever happens. You want to get it all done, but we want to feed ourselves from our gardens on the coast as much as we can year-round, which means succession planting. So I'm starting mustards when I see those daffodils, and I'm going to keep sowing those on 2-week intervals until I get into things like the soil's warmer, and I'm now focused on things like transplanting my tomatoes and all those things. So everything has a season, and if you can sync your garden to that season, you're going to have great success.
Well, I know you're a master at doing that.
And when you have success, it's more enjoyable to be in your garden, too.
That's the truth. I was just talking to Brian, the station manager here at Cortes Radio, before we started the show, and we were both saying, it just takes some success under your belt to really give you that confidence. He's having duck challenges, and I am having bird challenges. I did plant beans and peas, and they're getting snapped off at the sprouting stage there. You have any tips for keeping that from happening?
Well, pay attention to, birds are a little harder to track because they're a little bit more daylight and weather dependent. Like we've just had all the flocks of the snow geese flying over. I take that as a really good sign, but it varies a little bit more, not so weather dependent as the garden is. But gold-crowned sparrows, it's always good to have a network of other gardeners that you kind of are in contact with. So I know when the South End shows up and there's gold-crowned sparrows, I got a couple days before they make their way to the center of the island here and eat everything.
Exactly. I love their song, but boy, when they arrive, I just dread it. But I like your idea of tracking them somehow with your neighbors. Part
of that, too, is when we're pushing the season of those peas, right? You started them really early, so when those gold-crowned sparrows show up, they're like, wow, look at this exotic treat.
That's
Whereas
right.
It's just 2 or 3 weeks a little bit later, then all of a sudden there's more available on nature's palate, so your peas don't look quite as tasty a couple weeks later, too. And again, I'm always torn between, a year-round, just want to have food, and being a market gardener. Because as a market gardener, we're always trying to push the season a little bit. We want to be the first to have the stuff at the farmer's market. We want to be the first to have that giant broccoli because, well, the price is a little bit better and everyone's excited about the first of something. But in your home garden, if you're not so driven by those economic factors, a little bit more patience and a little bit more time working on the soil, building compost, those things are going to propel you into years of success down the road, as opposed to peas a little bit earlier.
Very wise words. Be a little more patient. It's a long-term succession planting, not a sprint. Now, just quickly, what does this hot spell mean for planting? Is there, is it bad news for lettuces? Good news for beans?
Well, again, things like a lot of the success right now is like things like I have great cover cropping that I make sure I get in the fall. So right now when this heat comes, I have cover crops that are growing lush and rank, and I'm going to turn those in the next little while. It's, making sure your soil's covered. It's a good time to start a little cultivation when it's dry like this. We never want to work wet soil. So right now, as someone that's got a lot of soil to work up, I'm pretty encouraged by this weather. It's also when you turn soil and it's dry like that, the weeds are a little bit slower to regrow. The warm weather for me right now is the biggest challenge is in the greenhouses, is just having to do so. I have so many plants in cloches, in greenhouses, in little temporary cloches, because it was a little bit cooler in the last few weeks with those cold nights. So everything's sort of been, it's not getting into the garden quite as soon. I'm trying to be patient, but that hot weather means I'm watering a lot of stuff.
Well, I've seen your amazing setup, your production garden, your greenhouses. You feed a lot of people, and our island on Cortes Island is really grateful for that. Now, just one real quick thing before we wrap it up. I've noticed things are already starting to flower and go to seed. When is a good time to start seed saving? Should we be thinking about that even this early into the season? I know you're a big seed saver.
Yes, you do. Shout out to all the other members of the BC Eco Seed Co-op. When it comes to things that are really easy, that are self-pollinating, that's just more making sure that you've given them the love they need. But things like, say, winter squash, which will outcross and insect pollinate, and you can decide you're going to pick your one variety. That's the squash you're going to grow this year, and save all the seeds from your Thelma Sanders, your butternut, whatever it is, decide on one squash and pick that. Starting with good open pollinated seed stock that's local and reliable, so that if it is a good something, you can save the seeds. Seed saving is pretty easy to do for yourself.
Well, I know it's near and dear to your heart, and
it is.
I want to have you back on Gabbing About Gardening when we can talk about just that topic, saving seeds. And yes, that shout out to BC Eco Seed Co-op. People can check them out online. There's a group of people locally who are saving seeds to make sure that we have them when we need them as a part of our food security. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your garden to be with us, Adam. I look forward to talking with you again soon on Gabbing.
Well, thank you very much, Lou, and happy gardening to everyone out there.
Happy gardening to you. Go out there and get dirty again.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Adam.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
That was Adam Schick from Linnea Farm. He came in out of his beautiful production garden to share his gardening tips with us, and all about phenology, learning to be patient, but also learning to read the signs that Mother Nature is always giving us. Coming up next is Marc Doll from Quadra Island. Marc is telling us what not to do when it comes to soil health. Stay with us. I'm Lucretia. This is Gabbing About Gardening on Cortes Radio 89.5 FM.
Get your toes tapping and body moving with Nat King Kono's Lunchtime Locomotion. Thursdays 11 to 1, grooves exploring round-the-world upbeat pop, rock, jazz, fusion, and world beat, nostalgia and adventure, spirits lift with the Lunchtime Locomotion, Thursdays 11 to 1, here on CKTZ 89.5 FM.
Hello again, and welcome back to Gabbing About Gardening. Building healthy soil is really the bottom line when it comes to a successful garden. And one of my favorite guys to talk to about soil building is Marc Doll. Marc Doll joins us now from his 40-acre homestead on Quadra Island. Hello, Marc, and welcome to Gabbing About Gardening.
Hello, Lou. How are you?
Oh, just wonderful. And how are you on this glorious day?
Oh, it is just fantastic out there.
Okay. Now, I want to know, Mark, when did you realize that you were a soil and compost fanatic? When did that dawn on you? Because I really do think of you that way. I hope that's okay.
Well, I'll take it. Actually, it was one of those things that there was a seminal moment. I had been associated and affiliated with a passive greenhouse in Invermere, and they had invited Elaine Ingham in for a weekend seminar. So we drove out to that, and at that seminar, for the first time, she pulled out her microscope and showed what living soil looked like, and it was identifying what was in it, and it blew me away, and it completely changed everything, how I perceive soil and how I went about gardening, and even the life track that I'm kind of on right now. So it all kind of came and stemmed from that very first experience with microscopy and living soil.
Wow. You really kicked it up a notch when you got into it to that degree. Most of us are not looking at our soil under a microscope. Most of us are just out there trying to do the best we can to give our soil what it needs. But, I wanted to talk with you today about what are some of the most common mistakes that we're making when it comes to soil health, and how can we temper those bad habits that we might have developed?
I've been thinking about this week. And the best thing I can come up with is that the biggest mistake we have is we treat soil like a growing medium and not like a living interconnected web of stuff we can't even, the best science is only now starting to comprehend. Like any science dating 20 years ago, as I get deeper and deeper into the science, anything about 20 years ago is basically wrong. So if you've had a belief about something about soil, whether it be that pH affects your absorption ability and availability of certain elements, and that is, a Bible truth, as I was taught, we now know that that's not actually 100% correct. So either things that we've known for our whole lives are either totally wrong or are missing elements to make them incorrect or misinformed or only a part of the picture.
Okay, well, you've got my head spinning right now, but there certainly must be some things that we are doing. I mean, I really appreciate what you've just said about not thinking of soil as a growing medium, but a network of life. And I know you're a fabulous preacher of that. What are we doing that is hurting this network of microbes and bacteria and things that we want in our soil?
Well, we hurt it when we think we can be the conductor or the engineer that's going to be able to make the associations, whether we're throwing on nitrogen fertilizer because we see that makes things greener. So we've got a solution to a problem that we have. So we take one element of a very complicated puzzle and we throw that out there. Or we've got a fungal problem. So we're going to throw a fungicide at something because we've identified a mold issue of some sort. So we've as the the power person in this relationship with our soil think we've got the solution, and we attack that problem, and we end up making things incredibly worse as we go through. We call it, it's been deemed the moron principle. So you take something and you put some more on, and that means that you're breaking the relationship in the soil of that element with so many other things. So it requires you to put more on in the future. Mm-hmm. And that concept is how industrial agriculture has attacked and literally attacked soil and has been turning it into dirt since the beginning of agriculture, but especially since the end of the Second World War, when we really discovered how to recycle munitions into nitrogen fertilizer.
That is such a good way of describing it. Thank you, Mark. More on. I've made that mistake, even though I've been gardening for a long time. I love what you're talking about in terms of this soil food web and understanding the connectivity. Do you have some favorite practices and soil amendments that you found really supports the health of your soil as a web, as a network of life?
Well, for sure. I think there's two things that come that doesn't matter how deep down a rabbit hole that you go in any particular vein of the soil science, it comes back to two common denominators, and that's carbon and life. So whether any rabbit hole that I've gone down in the last number of years, and some of it I still, I struggle to understand some of the science. I'm not a scientist, but I've listened to, people like Olivia Hussam, who's just come up with this amazing new way of looking at soil, and I can grab maybe 10% of it. But what I do understand, and I can check everything that he's saying, comes back to, well, what you need in your soil is life, and you need the carbon to support that life. So what our focus on in our gardening and in all the pastures that we're doing is ensuring that you are adding carbon, whether that be in my pastures with use of animals and the grasses, or in the garden with use of compost teas. And with those elements, you're letting nature make all those complicated relationships that we have, in our high sense of self, have decided that human beings can make those relationships for nature. The things that have been created over literally billions of years, we can come in with our Superman cape and fix. If we can dilute it down to those two elements of add carbon and add life, nature is going to make those associations that we can't even comprehend.
Add carbon and add life and feed the soil, it sounds like you're saying. So compost, composted leaf mulch for the carbon. I just know that we have a continuing conversation here, Marc, and we're coming up to 12 o'clock in our break in station ID, but I'm really hoping that you will be a regular soil ambassador and we can talk again about ways to feed the soil. Will you join us the next time?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always here for you, Lou.
Thanks, Marc. I always depend on you, too. I learned so much from you. That's Marc Doll from Quadra Island. We're coming up to 12 o'clock noon. My name is Lucretia. You're listening to Gabbing About Gardening on Cortes Radio, 89.5 FM. We'll be right back.
All the cool cats are listening to the Shim Sham Show with Psychedelic Sam. It's on every Thursday night from 7 till 9 p.m. and again Mondays from 2 to 4. Right here at, where are we again? Oh, Cortes Community Radio.
During these uncertain times, Cortes Radio has tried to bring you current news, updates, discussion of COVID in our community, as well as entertainment. As your community radio station, Cortes Radio is able to accomplish so much with very little funding. Would you be willing to donate so that we can continue to provide this service? You can contribute by PayPal, e-transfer, check, or money order. We even accept cash. Just go to the website, cortesradio.ca. One of our volunteers will be calling you soon as part of this fund drive. We thank you very much.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, gonna build a brand new world. Ain't gonna let nobody.
Well, our next guest has certainly helped to turn a lot of people around. Michael Ableman is the co-founder and director of Soul Food Street Farms, one of North America's largest urban agriculture enterprises, established to provide employment to people in Vancouver, British Columbia, who are managing poverty and addiction. He is the founder of the Nonprofit Center for Urban Agriculture, the registered charity Cultivate Canada, the Center for Arts, Ecology and Agriculture, and he's the co-founder of the Agrarian Elders. Michael Ableman currently lives and farms with his family at the historic 120-acre Foxglove Farms, and we've reached him on Salt Spring Island. Hello, Michael Ableman. Thank you so much for joining us on Gabbing About Gardening.
Well, thanks for having me. Nice to be with you.
Well, wonderful to be with you. I'm a huge fan. I have to tell you that you have really turned me around in terms of getting a feel for your vision and the work you've been doing in urban settings. You know, it's been documented and celebrated, recognized by filmmakers. Can you give us an overview and update on the projects that you're doing now?
Yeah, well, I mean, currently I'm still acting director of Soul Food Street Farms on the Downtown East Side in Vancouver, and running our family farm, which is at the moment, and certainly in the last year or so, has been my primary focus. It's a fairly extensive, as you mentioned, it's a large piece of land, very complex systems. We're growing a wide range of 60 different fruits and vegetables and grain and dried beans and other things. So that is consuming a lot of my time. And, of course, working on a couple new books, book number 5 and 6. One's been in the works for about 8 years, and the other one is actually, interestingly enough, is a book focused on the theme is a veteran farmer's advice to home food gardeners, you know. So it's going to be some of my hard-earned secrets over the last 43 years. But written to gardeners. I've never done anything like that, but I was asked to do it, and so I'm doing it.
Well, I can't think of a better person to do that. You know, I'm sitting here at Cortes radio station on Cortes Island, holding your book, Street Farm, and I'm just blown away not only by the magnificent writing and the storytelling. You know, it's not a how-to book necessarily, although it does give a lot of great advice for people who want to bring the same kind of vision of urban street farming to their communities. But it's the stories, the heartwarming stories, and the photographs, Michael. Wow. It just reads like a storybook. I can open it anywhere and feel inspired by it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, that was an attempt to tell the story of the work we did on the Downtown East Side, but to tell it in a way that was brutally honest. In fact, revealing all the mistakes we made. You know, when a lot of so-called development work that people attempt to do in various parts of the world with the best of intentions often creates more problems than it solves. And I was very cautious about how we did our project on the Downtown East Side and how integrated it was with that community and whether it was actually invited or not. And I tell the story of, you know, all the things that we faced and areas we fell short, but there are also some successes. But that is kind of the spiritual story of the work we do in Vancouver. I did more recently a little tiny handbook, which is kind of the how-to, the nuts and bolts of farming in the city, which is called Farm the City, and that was published by New Society the first time I worked with a Canadian publisher, actually. So that one is more the how-to, and that's floating around somewhere.
Well, you have so many books, and I'm now in the process of collecting every one of them because they all they're
There's
just
a couple I don't have, so maybe I'll have to call you on them.
Okay, we'll stay in touch on that one. What kind of differences has soul food street farming made in people's lives?
Well, you know, I'm really careful in how I use the word success in regards to the population, the people that we work with. As you mentioned, the focus of that project is the agriculture is just to serve a bigger purpose, and that is to provide meaningful employment, training, and meaningful opportunities to people who had a hard go. And we've been doing that for, just about 13 years. We have people who are still employed with us, some of whom didn't hold jobs for 5 or 6 months, who are still working with us after all those years. But, our job and our goal is not to get people off of drugs or to try to save anyone. That's not my role. It's just to give someone a reason to get out of bed each day and a community to participate in, a sense of purpose, these are powerful things, and we have seen some amazing and wonderful shifts in the lives of the people we work with. But, addiction is a lifetime thing. It's always on your shoulder. And so I don't define our success in terms of, the way people who are not familiar with addiction might define it. In other words, we're not trying to clean people's drug habits up. That's not the purpose, And so our version of success is incremental, It's day by day. And I think that along with the influence we've had and the positive experience of our staff, we've also, that project has been looked at from people all over the world. At one time, it was the largest urban agriculture project in the world. I mean, we're producing over 30 tons of food on 4 acres of pavement using a really innovative system that I designed years ago, and which allows us to farm either on top of contaminated soil or pavement, which every city in the world is dealing with. Those are issues everywhere. So we've developed a safe system to do that, and also a system that allows us to move on short notice because of the high cost and high value of land in Vancouver.
That is just phenomenal to me. I look at these pictures in your books. I see that it's really happening, and I'm delighted that people are taking their cues from you. Are you still teaching and helping people to use your system as a model in other places around the world?
I mean, I think the best that we can do, because I've always believed that because agriculture and anything agricultural requires such a particular, microcosmic local adaptation, I don't try to suggest that what we're doing can be picked up and just moved anywhere. I think that some of the systems we're using, certainly the growing boxes that we designed, various systems that we use, the types of seeders and other things that we're working with can be adapted and adopted anywhere. And the basic challenges and principles are similar everywhere. But I always encourage people to really ask some important questions of themselves and of their communities before setting up a project like this, and making it appropriate to that culture, that community, that neighborhood, that climate. And, take what you can from what we have done and improve on it. And certainly that has happened. I think there's some great work going on all over the world in this regard.
There really is. I'm glad that you said that. I mean, the garden culture is flourishing on planet Earth, and people are just taking whatever situation they're in and somehow making it better. You describe some of this in your book, Street Farm, where you talk about the challenges that you had with rats, for instance, and the challenges with space. And I'm really interested in how you used vertical systems in dealing with your space limitations. That's very impressive.
First of all, I should say to your audience that we are a soil-based system. I'm not a believer in soilless systems. I think the idea that we can somehow solve the problems in the food system with more technology, either by using non-soil approaches or by these extremely high-tech vertical systems that you see being used in various places. I think that it's true that in the city, space is highly limited. Lateral space, I should say, but vertical space is more available. We took 6-inch PVC pipes and drilled them out and created strawberry towers. This was not a purchased product like you see around. This is something we just made, and we grew berries in a vertical capacity. We have an orchard in the city, which is about 500 trees roughly, which again uses vertical space because obviously trees grow up, and that's been unusual, growing an orchard in boxes. But it's working. We're growing persimmons and figs and apples and pears and plums and a whole range of really interesting varieties of tree crops.
Well, you're showing that it can be done. You know, people have so many reasons for not doing things, and you're showing us that we can adapt and do these things. And I am so with you, Michael. I got to have my hands in the soil. I am all about getting closer to Mother Nature, not closer to technology necessarily. But, you know, I'm just so deeply appreciative of the work that you're doing, the message you're sending, and really looking forward to advice to gardeners. I feel like this has been a long time coming. When is that book coming out?
That manuscript will go in late winter, and it's usually a year from that point to when it comes out. It has a working title, Grow Good Grub. But I wanted to say, you know, based on something you said, one thing I would encourage any gardener is to throw away all the rules and everything you've learned and be willing to be incredibly experimental and really base your experience and what you're doing more on observation than on what you've read or learned or been told. Because Soul Food Street Farms is a great example of we were told this was not possible. You know, the things that we're doing was not possible, you know. Of course, as soon as I hear that, I want to do it. But I think that people get limited by what they've read or they've heard, and I think there is incredible opportunity in gardening. Gardens are the incubators. They're the places where the discoveries can be made that can be applied to larger scale food production. That's where that intimacy of a garden scale is remarkable in its ability to provide us with a feedback loop. And I think gardeners have a incredibly important role if they're willing to be experimental and try things out. We're living with a 7,000-year agricultural history that was based on trial and error. And if we're not willing to make mistakes, we don't learn anything new. And that's the exciting part of all this. You know?
It's totally exciting and encouraging. We seem to be on that theme today. We opened today's show with Adam Schick from Linnea Farm, and he echoes so much of what you're sharing with us right now, Michael, about experimentation. He was talking about phenology and really looking to Mother Nature for our signs of how to proceed, when to plant things. Mm-hmm. And your throw away the rules and be willing to be experimental is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, the most important agricultural and horticultural skill is not, seeding or cultivating or irrigation or soil science or any of those things or botany. It's observation. And if you develop that particular skill, you will become an exceptional gardener. And I think that's really amazing. And it's so much fun to play with, so yeah.
And the way that you describe in your book soil as a part of recovery is just so incredibly beautiful. I'm just going to read a part that really touched me. I hope you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
You write, salvation is a big idea. No one does it to you or for you. I never get into this work to save anyone, but I believe that simple things can help in profound ways. I know from experience, for instance, that salvation can come from the soil. Wow, that's the church I want to belong to.
That's awesome.
I am a believer, Michael Ableman, and I am looking forward to Grow Good Grub, and I hope you will come back and join us again on Gabbing About Gardening.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We'll be in touch, and great appreciation for everything that you're doing. Just quickly, though, how can people help you? How can they get involved?
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, if obviously without being too shameless, if people, especially by buying the Street Farm book, it helps the project in Vancouver or Farm the City, the how-to book that New Society did, or any of the other books, that has a direct support level. They can also, Soul Food Street Farms is owned by a registered charity called Cultivate Canada, and they can certainly make a donation, and that helps support the social aspect of what we do. The farm itself is self-supporting, but we raise money to support all the other things we do for people that work with us. So they can go on to Soul Food Street Farm's very, very in need of rebuilding website, and that'll tell them how to donate.
Okay, thank you. Donate to Soul Food Street Farms and buy some of those many books that Michael Ableman has written. They are all treasures. You'll keep them in the family forever. Thank you again, Michael. Enjoy.
All the best to you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. We've been talking with Michael Ableman from Salt Spring Island and his family farm there. Michael is a longtime organic gardener and farmer and the founder or co-founder of Street Farm, the urban farming project in Vancouver. Coming up next is Jennifer Banks Doll. Jennifer is going to be talking with us about getting kids into the garden. You stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute. This is Cortes Radio, CKTZ 89.5 FM. Talk to you in a minute.
Tune in right here on Cortes Community Radio 89.5 FM for the Misty Morning Hop every Monday from 9:30 till 12.
Oh, that beautiful music from Willow. That is C minor. Those gals really know how to make a song click. I just love it. Jennifer, are you with us?
Yes.
So, Jen, let's just jump right in about your daughters. How old are your kids, and what are they doing in the garden with you, and how did you ever get them to just jump in and be the little gardeners that they are?
Well, Lou, my girls, I have twin girls, and right now they're 12, but they've been gardening since they were babies. We used to live in Calgary, and it's so funny. We bought a house with a completely hardscaped backyard because it was low maintenance, and I had no intentions of ever having a garden, much less a farm. But quickly after they were born, we started thinking about how can we get their hands in the soil. And so we started with pots. Basically, put a bunch of pots in our backyard, and they just started planting seeds and watering and just doing it really organically and in a fun way.
Wow, that's brilliant.
I remember doing that with my mom, so it's kind of just an easy thing to do. And then we changed our lives, and now we live on Quadra with a big farm, and so things are completely different. But when we got here, I once again gave them their own garden so they could really just play and experiment and really have that feedback loop that permaculture talks about. So they can play around.
Yeah.
They don't really read instructions. They don't really listen to what I say or what my advice. They just do it. And sometimes their garden it performs better than mine, just because they're just doing it and they're observing and having fun with it. So.
And to just give them that space, and of course, who doesn't love mud patties? At the age of a year old or even younger. Some of it goes in the mouth, but apparently that's a good thing.
Oh, it is. I think so too.
So, what are they growing now in their gardens?
Their newest love is flowers. So they have started a lot of perennial flowers in their garden, and flowers that we eat, like nasturtiums and violets. And every year they grow radishes. That's not something that I really grow, but they love to grow it. They usually have some kale trees happening. They built a bean teepee a few years back with a community member here, so they always set up their bean teepee, and it's really something you could easily build from, bamboo or just sticks. It's an easy thing for kids to do.
It's quite magical, isn't it? Has their garden prowess also translated into preparing food? Do they get involved in making meals with you?
They have done that as well since they were very little. I guess that's just my husband's philosophy of parenting, is that kids should be involved from a very young age. And every year they get a bit better at gardening and cooking. But, when they were little, they were like so many other kids. They did not like eating their vegetables, especially salads. I could not get them to eat a salad. And there was one time we were visiting another farm when they were about 7. And the kids at that farm started taking them around the garden and getting them to taste all different things. And there was one particular thing they really fell in love with, which grows as a weed in most of our gardens, and that's sorrel. They tasted sorrel, that sour taste, and they just loved it. And ever since then, they've been planting sorrel on purpose in their garden and then picking it and putting it into salads. And they love salad now. And another thing that we do is we grow sprouts, which is a really easy thing for kids to do. That's a really nutritious thing to add to salads, and you can grow that year-round. So
free-range kids grazing in the garden, eating sorrel. Oh, the visual's lovely. In fact, I love your Facebook page, Jen, where you show your daughters in the garden and preparing food in the kitchen. All of the flowers. Your garden space is lovely, and I'm really encouraged, and I know a lot of people are. I'm encouraged as a gardener, but also just the fact that we're teaching new generations just by having a garden and letting them free range in the garden, to appreciate getting their hands in the soil and to build confidence. What's your next step in your gardening with your kids?
Good question. Well, last year they each wanted their own garden. They didn't want it. In previous years they had shared a garden, so I gave them each their own garden, and one, she didn't weed, I think, once last summer. So I've had to tarp her garden, and we're going back to them sharing a garden. So they have their own garden, but they also help us in the garden more and more. So one of the things they do that's a really great thing for kids to do is they help plant potatoes. Because potatoes aren't a plant that you're going to easily wreck. You know what I mean? Like so many little plants, you're going to step on them and destroy them, or when you're transplanting, you're going to break the stem. And it's easy for adults to do, much less kids. But potatoes, really hard to wreck a potato. So they plant potatoes every year, and we're about to do that again this year. And I also am getting them more and more involved in harvesting and processing food, because that's a huge amount of work. We grow enough food to supply us year round. And so I tend to get overwhelmed by a certain time of year when everything is being harvested and, waiting to be processed. So I think that's going to be the next step, is really getting them more involved at that level.
I love that. The planting of potatoes, of course, that is absolutely a fabulous step. And everybody loves potatoes, right? To eat.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much, Jen. It's been wonderful talking with you. I really look forward to hearing an update of how your garden is going and how your kids are doing in the garden. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Lou.
Okay. That's Jennifer Banks Doll from her lovely 40-acre homestead on Quadra Island. You've been listening to Gabbing About Gardening. My name is Lucretia. We're here with you every week on Tuesdays at 11:30. And next week, we'll have more gardening tips for you. Now, go on outside and get dirty.